On Sunday, Atlanta goes for a third straight win and a third straight win inside the division. The guy that might make it happen? Matt Ryan. We'll talk about why next, right here on AJC Falcons News Now.
This is AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Here are your hosts, Brandon Adams and former Atlanta Falcon Chuck Smith.
You've heard of a false start in football before. Every now and then we have one on the football show as well. It's AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. My name is Brandon Adams. Great to have the former Falcon Chuck Smith with us as well. And frankly, pretty curious here. Are the Falcons going to get a third straight win in the division, third straight win overall, staying hot, beating the Bucs, sending up a Thanksgiving showdown, looking for win number 2 against the Saints? A lot kind of out in front of the Falcons suddenly after a miserable first half. The second half of the season thus far has been decidedly better.
You know, they got a lot to play for, and think about it. The Falcons right now, if you're the Falcons, you look at the last 2 teams you beat and you see Tampa coming up, I think Falcons should be feeling really good. I mean, they're hot right now. The confidence is through the roof, and I'm interested to see how this thing plays out. It could get interesting.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. I mean, look, these are Tampa and Atlanta teams that have the same record, but seemingly kind of gone about collecting those wins maybe a little bit differently. I think you got to be careful with the Bucs defense a bit. You know, when you look at the way that Jameis Winston has struggled, 4 picks last week, leading the league in interceptions right now, with all due respect to Mike Evans. This is a Falcons offense. I think I probably trust more than I would trust what Tampa has going offensively. Maybe a little bit of revenge on the line for Dirk Koetter. We'll get into that more a little bit later on. So from that standpoint, even with Atlanta playing as badly as it did for the first half, this has always kind of felt like a matchup for Atlanta that was pretty favorable. When you looked at most likely games to win, this home game against Tampa has kind of always loomed as the most likely win, and now it would be a third straight.
And it is. And when you look at a lot of it has to do with Tampa's inability to draft well and to develop players. Because when you look at this Tampa team, they just cut Vernon Hargreaves, cornerback, first rounder. They cut Noah Spence, second rounder, went to Ohio State. And look at Jameis Winston. That was the same draft. So right now, when you look at the development of this Tampa, this defense, the guys haven't panned out, and neither has Jameis Winston. So when you're matching up against a team like Atlanta and you can't draft well and you lose guys and you have to cut them, it doesn't set up well for you, particularly when you're playing against this offense.
James Dockery says it's too little too late. Quinn is toast. So I guess let's deal with that here for a moment in terms of what is Dan Quinn's current status and how is this Atlanta team responding to what was obviously some tough questions surrounding Quinn going into the kind of unofficial first half of the season, heading into that Falcons bye where Arthur Blank made the decision to keep Quinn as coach, at least for right now. Well, Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan made an appearance on a national radio show this week, the Rich Eisen Show. That was one of the topics that came up about all the stuff that the players, Ryan included, were hearing about Quinn for a while, and as a team, how they've chosen to respond to that. Here is what Matt Ryan told Rich Eisen this week about Quinn's status and kind of how the team felt about hearing those things about their embattled coach. Here's Matt Ryan.
We all love Dan. There's no question about that, and I think he's a great coach. I mean, he's awesome in the locker room. Guys really, enjoy playing for him. And so as players, you take, personal responsibility for that. You want to win games. You want to keep guys here. And it's been good. The last couple of weeks, the locker room and kind of rallying and heightening our focus and all those things have been really good. So we just need to keep that rolling.
So I think that Ryan uses a very interesting word there. He says rallying. Rallying to Quinn's defense, rallying for Quinn, and maybe in the hopes that he'll keep his job. There's no doubt Falcons players seem to like Quinn, and now they, according to Matt Ryan there, are seemingly trying to play for him. How much of these last 2 Falcons wins do you attribute to Atlanta all of a sudden saying, hey, we want to show support for our coach who was given a reprieve by the owner before the bye week?
Well, I think that's kind of a rallying cry. That's, like they said, somewhat motivation. But I think the Falcons are just more fundamentally sound. I just think when they're fundamentally sound that they're going to have an opportunity to win. But, you hear them talking about Q. Now, I understand because I've been on, most of the coaches that I was on that got on the hot seat. I was trying to pack up the wagon and get them up out of there. It wasn't the same way with Q. It was where you didn't like them. But what I like, these guys, they really like Dan.
Yeah, and so, can we push pause on that for a second? Because I think what you're saying is really interesting. That not every player feels that way about every coach. There are situations where you may have a coach who's on the hot seat, and you may be glad that's the case.
Right.
Would you mind talking a little bit more about that? Because I do think that's kind of an interesting description of the situation.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, I think when you get players, there's different situations within the team. There are guys who think they should be starting. There are guys that are mad about money. There are guys that are mad about, how they're treated. They don't like the assistant head coach, or they don't like the assistant coach. But a lot of players want to get a guy out of there. They're like, I'm telling you, like with me, there were some of our coaches, with me and some of the other guys, we had a U-Haul out back, and we helped them pack up so we can get up out of here. we helped them pack, you know what I'm saying? But with Dan Quinn, and I'm going to tell you the things they like about him. Number one, Dan Quinn takes care of them, not from a player standpoint, but as a man standpoint. When they're beat up, Q's going to do what? Hey, man, we're going to take care of you guys. All the different things. I mean, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of cool stuff they do. But, it's really interesting that that's their motivation. So there's no question they're motivated by Dan Quinn being on the hot seat. But there are also going to be players in there that necessarily don't look at it like that. But right now, it's helping, and I hope they keep it going.
To go back to James' comment a moment ago about the idea of it being too little too late. So I guess the skeptical Falcons fan may ask the question of, well, if they want to play for Quinn, if they want to show out for him, then why didn't they start doing this sooner?
Well, I said that earlier. We talked about the Vic Beasley cut and what I said about Vic.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, man, you're not paid to play for Dan Quinn. You're a high draft pick, so you're here to play for your team, and then you want to win championships at that. But there is questions about that. But to me, we saw it. So where people are saying, well, what was going on then? We know what was going on.
Yeah.
They wasn't blocking. They weren't tackling. We weren't making big plays. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it's easy from that standpoint. But now they're doing all those things that, you're supposed to do.
Mom Spaghetti watching on YouTube, I really appreciate the kind words saying, look forward to this show each and every week. I really appreciate that. Chuck and I are both very grateful to have you being a part of our program each and every week. So in a moment, I'm going to let you hear another clip from Matt Ryan on the Rich Eisen show where he kind of talks about the improved play the last couple of weeks and kind of how Ryan, what he attributes that to. But before we get to that, for like the 9,000th time, let me ask this question. So if you're a Falcons fan, how do you process this, right? A season that was almost over before it started because of how bad you played in the early weeks, and all of a sudden now playing in a level against Carolina on the road, which is no easy feat, New Orleans on the road, which is definitely no easy feat. And there is that element of Falcons fans who just want to say, where's this been all year? If you can do this now, why didn't you do it back when it mattered? Because, we're going to get into the Falcons' playoff odds before we're done today. If you find a way not to lose to Tennessee, which you really had no excuse getting beaten up by as bad as you did, if you find a way to convert one of these late game situations, just salvage another win. If you're 5-5 right now instead of 3-7, the scenario the rest of the way is completely different. We've got people filling our comment section with, hey, here's what you need to really make a serious run of the top teams in the NFC right now. Unfortunately, Atlanta didn't do that, but it is 2 weeks, though, of playing better. So how do you process the last 2 wins? And if you're a Falcons fan, how are you supposed to feel about these wins, knowing that just a little bit more good football in the first half of the season, we're having a very different conversation right now?
When the Falcons are good, they're good.
Yeah.
But when they are bad, they are bad. So we see that. So to me, I don't know how to process it. All I can say is this. I think players underachieved in these situations. I mean, it's easy for you to talk about what the coaches didn't do.
Yeah.
But look at the tackling. Look at the coverages. Some of the things now we talked about organization. Those are things that, the substitution pattern, those are things that the coaches are responsible for. But there is really no way to process it because the low has been so low.
Right.
Now the high is so high.
Yeah.
So I don't think they can even process it. The only thing you can say is we went back to the fundamentals,
That's
like you're
right.
saying, blocking and tackling. So I don't think they truly know, but now they're doing what they're supposed to do. But it's hard to process when you've been at the highs and the lows.
I think that's exactly right. Now, Matt Ryan did attempt to process all of this on that Rich Eisen interview. Let me let you hear a little bit more with Ryan, speaking to the national guy here, on his thoughts about why it is the Falcons have played so much better as of late. Take a listen to this.
It's a head-scratcher for us. We felt like the first half of the season just, wasn't who we are, and we just weren't very consistent. And, last 2 weeks, I think we played complementary football. We've done a good job in all 3 phases of just going out playing the way that we're capable of, not doing anything crazy, but just but just playing good football. And so, our backs are against the wall for sure, but it is nice to see us playing the way we're capable of playing.
So no doubt fans are enjoying seeing these wins, especially against division rivals, teams that Falcons fans don't really like. But the one thing I'm going to push back on a little bit from Ryan there is this idea of, well, the first half of the season's not who we are. And unfortunately, I have to say in response to that, no, it is. What you are is a team that gave away its season the first half and now trying to scratch, fight, and claw just to sort of salvage some reputation here in the second half. But you don't get to say these last two games, that's the real us. The first half of the season, that was the pretend version of us. No, you don't get to say that. I mean, what was the Bill Parcells always said, you are what your record says you are. Right. And Atlanta's a 3-7 team. I don't care if the losses all came early and the wins can't come late. One way or another, 3-7, and on the outside looking in, for the most part, of the playoff picture, that is who Atlanta is. You don't get to just excuse away the first half of the season by putting together a couple of wins here thus far to start the second half of the year.
Well, I think that was what you got to say as the leader. I think some of that has to do with your own team, keeping their confidence high, but I also think some of that has to do with the public. You want the public to believe in you. Say, hey, man, that wasn't us, guys. So this second half, you're going to see us. This is who we are, the Atlanta Falcons. So that not only kind of adds to the excitement of, the fans, especially the hardcore fans, and then the players. He's the leader. So I think Matt Ryan is somewhat of a message he's sending when it comes to not only himself, the players, the fans, and the entire organization, trying to light that spark and keep it going.
All right, let me get a couple of comments here on both Facebook and YouTube as Atlanta gets ready to take on Tampa on Sunday. Shad, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Shad Jasaverich, and I apologize if I did not, maybe it's Siad, says, I think the trade of Sanu and possibly Vic and Freeman, they understood it's for real. And that actually is, I think, probably a pretty good point.
It's a great point.
The thought that Freeman could have been traded, even though he wasn't, the thought that Beasley's job could have been on the line in terms of an active player in the NFL, sometimes that does light a fire. One of the criticisms I've had of Atlanta is sometimes there isn't enough player accountability within the organization right now. Maybe behind the scenes there was more of that than we realized, and maybe that kind of snapped some guys into focus. That is actually, I think, probably a pretty good point.
That's a great point. And when you think about it, it got as far as where Vic Beasley he actually answered questions about being traded. So as a competitor, you're going to go out there and try to, show people that you can ball. And when you look at Freeman, he came back, he's gotten injured, but from Vic's standpoint, I see Vic playing harder.
Yeah.
I see Vic, in the mix more. But also when you think about all that from things that happen, Sanu gets traded, Ridley steps up, Hooper was who he is. But let me just throw out another name, Devondre Campbell. Now last week, he's blitzing, he got a sack, he's playing great in coverage. So I think all that everything we're talking about, Dan Quinn, throw in, guys basically being embarrassed. So let me answer something that you went back on. You talked about who's the responsibility. I think that's what you said. Those guys got pride.
Yeah.
You are absolutely embarrassed. And I'm going to use myself as a player. You are embarrassed. Yeah. I mean, you are embarrassed. So those guys do have pride. You might not win, but I can tell you this, after you lose, 6-5 or whatever it was in a row, I mean, you want to win not only for Q, but you want to win for yourself too.
I think that's right. The Undisputed Queso on YouTube says, I don't think they get rid of Quinn at the end of the season. All the players are fighting for him now. And I think our feeling on this is going to also be determined by how the rest of the season goes, because it's going to be really hard to maintain this level of play the rest of the way. Even Tampa on Sunday, Atlanta's about a 4.5-point favorite. If you give Atlanta 3 for being at home, which Vegas typically does, then that gives you an idea right now that Vegas doesn't see a great degree of difference on a neutral field between Atlanta and Tampa right now. So that's not even an easy game necessarily with New Orleans, who wants revenge on Thanksgiving night. So there are ebbs and flows in terms of how fans react to Quinn. There was a lot of folks in our comment section calling for his job earlier in the year, a lot less as of late because the Falcons have been winning. But also, you got to be careful of what happens when that pendulum swings back the other way before the season's done, and there's a very good chance that it might.
It might, and I've said this since we've been on the show. The percentage are high that Dan Quinn is coming back. And if Dan keeps winning, the percentage, they're going to get higher and higher and higher. And let me tell you what I think, just my opinion. I think Arthur Blank sees that this coach is not a dumpster fire coach, that he can fix the problem. I'm just telling you. I just think when you look at the other guys that are out there, it's like, are we throwing out a guy that could one day, really be even a better coach? We're going through the learning process.
Yeah.
And I think me personally, I think Arthur Blank is willing, if Dan wins out, or at least if Dan wins a few of these games, I'm telling you, I think Arthur believes that he'll have to take a bullet, possibly, and give this man a chance. And Q, I think he believes that Q can turn it around because he's still he's a really creative, he's a really smart guy.
Falcons, Hawks, Braves fan extraordinaire on YouTube says bad losses to Tennessee, Arizona, and the Rams sunk the season. Yeah, and if you can find a way to win a couple of those. The Tennessee game I'll always highlight because that was a home game.
Yeah,
and the Arizona situation, because I still don't think the Cardinals are a very good team. You maybe highlight that one there as well. I guess from that standpoint, LA was also a home game too. You could pick any two of those three. Find a way to win a couple of those games. It's a different conversation right now, Chuck. It's a very different conversation.
I agree, and but look, most coaches in that situation would have already been fired.
Yeah.
So for Dan to have have the blessings and have the opportunity to even try to right the ship tells me something. And look where they are now. And it's not far-fetched that they could win out. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's not. Now percentages are very low.
Yeah.
But I mean, they can. I see 5 wins out of this easy.
We're going to talk more about Dirk Koetter in a moment. G Money mentions him on YouTube as well in terms of his dissatisfaction with the current performance of the offense here. And really, as bad as the defense has been, I do find myself asking more pointed, tough questions about the offense than I do the defense, because I think overall, when Hooper's healthy, obviously with Julio and Ridley and Ryan, when you've got that going on, I think of the Falcons' offense as actually a pretty talented group. Offensive line struggled earlier in the season. I think that's actually getting a little bit better as of late. But I think of this as a pretty talented offensive group all the way around. So when I start pointing out beyond Quinn individual nitpicks on the sides of the ball, my bigger questions for 2020 goes to how can you get this offense back performing at a high level again? So from that standpoint, I kind of agree with G Money that defense has been in the spotlight for the negative reasons, but in terms of how you get better for 2020, I've got more questions on offense than I do defense.
Well, again, ain't going to change. In my opinion, as you see what they're doing now, ain't going to change because Dan Quinn, you see what he just did on defense. If Dan Quinn thought that there needed to be some change and adjustments on offense, he might have added someone in or tweaked something here, and they might have done that. But as far as offense is concerned, Dirk Koetter, he's going to be here.
Yeah.
They didn't sign him for 1 year. I think everybody pretty much gets a 2-year deal. That's kind of standard NFL system. He might have a better one. But he's not going anywhere. They might tweak and do some different things on offense. So what you're seeing right now, this is the Falcons that you're going to see. It's just, the defense is not changing. You're going to see maybe some personnel changes, but this is your 2021 Falcons with maybe a few more twists. Not much is going to change when it comes to all those things.
Dre on Facebook says, if we lose any more games, we just wasted draft pick position just to prove a point. Come on, man. So I understand that, and I've certainly argued that as well. But right now, though, the best I can tell, Dre, the majority of Falcons fans are kind of enjoying the positive run here. That if we put this to a vote of how many of you want to go 1-15 and get the number 1 overall pick or top 3 pick, how many of you want to beat rivals like the Panthers and the Saints? I mean, I can say this as someone who argued a couple of weeks ago that the Falcons should go 1-15. I made my case for that. For the most part, I got shouted down on that in the comment section. To the extent that our comments are representative of Falcons fans overall, and I think it's a pretty good representation, Falcons fans have pretty much said loud and clear they'll take the wins now over the draft pick later. I don't know if that's the best decision or not, but Falcons fans have been, the majority of the ones we've heard from have been happier getting the wins than they would be for the draft position.
Right.
Plus, especially when you think about how bad Washington is, how bad Cincinnati is, these really, really high draft picks are just hard to come by this year. We've got a couple teams in this league that stink out loud.
Yeah, and yes, the Falcons, if they went 1-15, they probably would have got a high draft pick. We know that.
Yeah.
We know that a lot of things happen when it comes to you can improve when you do lose and things like that. But let me just put it this way. If you're, and remember, the NFL, it's a special fraternity. It's your privilege to be a part of it, and fans watch you, so you are playing for the fans. They do pay, your bill by going to the games and things like that. But imagine this. You're at your job, and everybody there is telling you, man, we want you to lose so we can gain something for our own self.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from an NFL standpoint, that's the same thing when fans are saying, hey, we want you guys to lose So remember, I understand this is a fantasy world for most people. Most of these guys are judged by just being fantasy guys. People don't see them almost as real people. But imagine in your job, someone telling you each and every week that we want you to lose.
Sure. No,
I want you to lose so we can. But these guys are human, and I just think for the city, this is Atlanta. I don't want them getting the number one pick. I could care less. In our situation, we already got a team that we think is Super Bowl ready. So I'm not willing to go 1-15 just so we can try to get number one. I don't want us to ever get the number one pick.
Okay.
I don't want to ever have to see, wow, Atlanta got, because look at what they do now with some of the teams. Well, they're the number one pick. They got the number one pick. It ain't helped Cleveland, now has it?
Right.
So enough said.
That's a fair point. Let me do one more comment for now, and then we'll get some more later on. Gary Reed Jr. says something kind of interesting. He says that he thinks Dirk Koetter coming back next year will be a better offensive coordinator in year 2 than he has been in year 1. Mm-hmm. And Gary, what his comment reminds me of is if you want to go back and look at Kyle Shanahan in 2015.
Great point.
The Shanahan offense in 2015 was completely ineffective. Shanahan was quite unpopular with Falcons fans. And in year 2, things got way better. Now, just because it happened once before doesn't mean it's destined to happen again. But I haven't really thought about that until Gary brought it up, that we have seen dramatic leaps year 1 to year 2 with offensive coordinators before. Would you think there's a possibility that could happen with Dirk Koetter if he's back again for 2020, that it's better in year 2, much the same way it was for Shanahan a few years ago?
Well, unfortunate for like Matt Ryan that, he's had a couple offensive coordinator, but absolutely, yes, Dirk Koetter would be better. If you got any kind of drive or any kind of want to be successful, you're going to do what it takes to improve the next year. So he'll have another year with Ridley. He'll understand a little more about Hooper. He'll have 2 offensive linemen, Lindstrom and McGarry, that, wow, they have a 1 year developed, so that helps him as an offensive coordinator. So there's so many components that will help Dirk Koetter next year that we don't have this year. So you might not get the benefits now, but there's no question next year in the second year will be better.
All right, so speaking of Dirk Koetter, it's AJC Falcons News Now. We're sponsored by Miller Lite, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. It tastes great, and it's just 96 calories, and it's great to have them as part of the program today and all season long. And, of course, if you're getting together for tailgate before the game, or if you're watching the game with friends on Sunday, first of all, tell them about AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, but also enjoy some Miller Lite as you gather around to watch some football with friends here this weekend. One of the big, interesting storylines for me on Sunday is the fact that Falcons offensive coordinator Dirk Koetter is playing his old team. Koetter was the head coach at Tampa as recently as last season, ousted there, now offensive coordinator with the Falcons. First of all, it's always kind of funny. It seems like the Falcons and the Bucs have more tangled personnel situations than really almost any 2 teams that I can think of. We always have thought of Atlanta and New Orleans being the biggest rivals in the NFC South and arguably in all of the NFL, and there's a reason for that. But organizationally, there's always been an interesting battle going on with Atlanta and Tampa.
Coaches switching places.
Coaches switching places. Rich
Mike
McKay,
Smith,
Mike Smith. Koetter, another one of those.
Raheem Morris.
Yeah, this is another. That's a great example. Morris is a great example. Another example of these organizations being intertwined. And Koetter was asked this week, hey, you're going to be coaching against the team that got rid of you. How does that feel? Is this going to be on your mind going into Sunday? And I thought the conversation from Koetter here was pretty interesting in terms of what he did say, what he didn't say, and maybe a couple moments of some real genuine honesty about the feelings. Here is Dirk Koetter on playing his old team.
I'm sure there will be at the end of the week. When you start off on Monday, we just got done getting the scouting report, and you're looking at the tape, and you're worried about, all of our coaches were getting the game plan together, working on that. So you don't really have that much time to think about it. But I'm sure at the end of the week, the worst part of any game is that 2 hours of waiting at the stadium before the game, and obviously you'll see some people that you're fond of, and maybe some that you're not.
I mean, don't you love that line in the end? He says, hey, when you're going to play this team, you're going to see some people that you're fond of and some people that you're not. And what it brings to mind for me is that, Koetter's record with Tampa was abysmal, right? It's not good. Mm-hmm. However, everybody's got their own side of the story, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like everybody's kind of got their thing of, well, if they would have just given me this and this, and we would have just done this instead of doing that, we'd have been a lot more successful. Koetter's got his own side of the story about why things in Tampa weren't better than they were, and I'm sure he probably didn't feel like he got the full cooperation of everyone that he needed to make that organization as successful as it could have been. So I'm guessing, even though he kind of for the most part tries to take the high road here, I'm guessing he'd love to stick it to the Bucs on Sunday. That's just human nature, right?
Yeah, no question. He would love to, and that's always something you'd like to go back and beat the team that got rid of you. But this is, to me, when you get fired and you had basically you didn't do well down there as a coach, someone take some of the zest out of it for me. When you basically the reason why we are where we are is part of what you left us.
Yeah.
You drafted Jameis Winston. You drafted Noah Spence. You drafted Vernon Hargrave. So when you go back now, what he might not want to see when he goes out there is them dudes that helped him get fired. You got coach killers out there. Jameis Winston's a coach killer. Dirk Koetter's here because Jameis Winston's a coach killer. So he drafted him. But here's the crazy part about the whole situation. If he doesn't get Jameis Winston, he gets Marcus Mariota, so he ain't have a chance. He have a chance. So, they are coach killers. So I'm sure he looks back, and you have to look back and say, wow, what else could I have done when it comes to that quarterback? The quarterback, listen, the lack of development of Jameis Winston is absolutely why Dirk Koetter is here. Simple as that.
And really, when you think about Atlanta on Sunday, trying to win this game, Ryan going out and outplaying Jameis Winston, something I think that Ryan's certainly capable of doing. I think they'll probably show that in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Sunday. But outplaying him there in that spot, I think is critical, just given the fact that Winston he's one of those guys that, he kind of keeps both teams in the game seemingly. He makes enough throws for his team. They're not really seriously considering benching him and going with a different quarterback, but he's also turning the ball over enough that the other team kind of has its chance there as well. I mean, Tampa had its chance to beat New Orleans last Sunday until Winston just absolutely gave it away. So, this is one of those examples of where I think, Matt Ryan is perpetually underrated and underappreciated by Falcons fans. And I think when you look at the quarterback on the other sideline on Sunday, I think you see an example of this. Winston's a quarterback you can't trust. Ryan, to me, is a quarterback that you can trust. And the difference between these two guys, I believe, is stark. And I believe on Sunday, assuming the Falcons win this game, I think that's going to kind of prove that point once again, is that Ryan is a guy that you can build an organization around, whereas right now, Jameis Winston, he may not be the kind of guy on the verge of getting benched, but you'd have a hard time really building a whole lot of your future around him.
Yeah, and Bruce Arians, head coach, has been defending Jameis, saying a lot of it's not his fault. And a lot of times, it's not always the quarterback's fault now. I mean, you get tip balls and different things, receivers running different routes. But I will, the comparison you made to Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston is not even one to be talked about because there really is no comparison.
Right.
Matt's been to Super Bowl, Jameis hadn't even been to the playoffs. But this Tampa team, I think the real matchup when you look at Matt Ryan, I think this pass rush is a little bit better than he's seen these last couple games now. Carolina was really good. You got Shaq Barrett, you got JPP, you got some action there. Offensively, got Mike Evans. This is, to me, the Falcons, it's a good matchup for the Falcons, but this isn't a team where, when I look at it, Atlanta's so superior that we're going to roll out the red carpet and say, hey, Tampa, come on down. You know what I'm saying? You're getting kicked out of here. But it's going to be a competitive game, and I guess this is what we call an NFL trap game. You know what I mean? Everything's looking, Atlanta's hot the whole nine.
Yeah.
But I think the energy from the Falcons and where they really are is going to, handle Tampa, but you never know.
I think that's probably well said. Let me let you hear one more from Dirk Koetter on this of, kind of pressed after saying what he said a moment ago. How do you really feel about the Bucs? Is this a team that you deep down you don't like, that you've still got some animosity for? And at this point in time, Dirk Koetter, for the most part, tries to take the high road. Here's Koetter again.
Anything still bug you about it?
No. I was just kidding. It's over, man. You can't live in the past. I work for the Falcons, and I'm with a great organization. And, it is what it is at this point. You just got to move on.
So I don't want to bring up a touchy subject with you, but, in your career, you left Atlanta. You took big money to go to the Carolina Panthers. You dealt with an injury situation there during that time. But, I'm guessing that you wanted to show the Falcons that they should have signed you to a big contract too, right? I mean, that when you left, maybe a little extra motivation to kind of go and I hate to say stick it to your old team, but isn't that some of that?
It wasn't as much stick it to my old team when I left. It was more like stick it to my friends. I mean, me and Bob Whitfield, we went against each other every day for 8 years.
Yeah.
I wonder what Bob. Jamal, we talked smack talk. So it wasn't as much. I didn't leave with that kind of hate. I acted like, during the game, I was all the bravado, pounding your chest, all that kind of stuff. But it really wasn't, it wasn't to the point where I disliked Atlanta. But I think the difference between me and Dirk Koetter, he really wasn't no buck. He was there. I mean, I played 100 plus games as a Falcon starter. He kind of came. He was a visitor. I'm kind of like, I live in this town, so I'm part of the Falcons. Good point. So it's a little different. I wasn't going to burn that kind of bridge. It wasn't that serious.
Good point. I think what we should always remember is is that those press conference words you hear, whether it be from a player or from a coach, that kind of cleaned up, buttoned up language, that's not necessarily the way that it really is behind the scenes.
Oh,
right?
no. In that situation, you're a coach because, like you said, there are going to be people on the field that you don't like. This is what I call it. I call it the Peyton Manning narrative, the Tiger Woods, the old Tiger Woods narrative. Everything's perfect. I'm just floating on a cloud. You say everything perfect when you know deep that we have learned behind these guys are absolute dogs when it comes to wanting to beat people. So yeah, Dirk Koetter, not saying he's a Peyton Manning kind of guy or my Tiger Woods good two shoes coaches speak stuff. Heck yeah, I'm sure he want to put it on him. No question about it. But here's the good thing I'll tell you about Dirk Koetter. He has the inside information on how do you handle Jameis. Some of the things that give him trouble. So I love where that comes from, where you got a guy who he's motivated to win, but he also has information the Falcons can use.
There's a conversation going on in our Facebook comment section. We're going to talk about some Falcons injuries here in a moment. But let me see if I can find the comment where this generates from at the beginning. Wayne Thomas going back at somebody on Facebook saying about Matt Ryan. I guess someone called Ryan an average quarterback. Wayne comes back and says average quarterbacks don't hit 10th all-time in passing yards. And so I guess here's my take on this. I've been thinking about this now for a little while because I thought Ryan played well this past Sunday in that win versus Carolina, getting those receivers involved the way that he did. Julio and obviously Ridley, who had the big day. I think that Ryan is sorely underappreciated by Falcons fans right now. And for me, I'm not going to blame the fans for this because I believe this, to me, is an organizational issue, both two ways. Part of this is a marketing problem, maybe, but certainly in terms of a personnel issue of if you've got a franchise quarterback and every year he gets a year older, every year Julio Jones gets a year older, all of a sudden now, Calvin Ridley's kind of coming into the prime of his career. When you're not utilizing those talents as well as you could, to me, that's the most damning thing about the Falcons organization right now, that you are in the midst still of the Matt Ryan prime, and you're in the midst still of the Julio Jones prime. I'll be honest with you. I don't love the contract they gave Julio at the beginning of the season, but there's no doubt that Julio is one of the great Falcons of all time, and he'll be remembered that way. But for now, it's not about looking to what he will be called once his career's done. You're in that prime part of his career right now. And I do believe that right now Atlanta's underutilizing these offense weapons they have, Ryan included. And the idea that we have people in our comment section that are calling Ryan an average quarterback, for me, that's not about their misinterpretation of the situation as much as it is about Atlanta's underutilization of their franchise quarterback. You cannot squander the prime years of your franchise quarterback. That's why I think that this offseason is critical for Atlanta, because either somehow bringing back Quinn, which I don't think would be a great idea, or making a new hire, one way or another, you have now made the determination for what you're going to do during the final years of the Matt Ryan prime. That makes this offseason, Chuck, I just think it's hugely important for Atlanta.
I think Matt Ryan is more than just average. I think he's a great quarterback. And I think Matt Ryan, one of the comparisons we used to get when Cam Newton was always around, people would say, who would you take, Cam or Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, who would what do you think about Cam? Okay, Cam Newton, he was an MVP, so was Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
Cam Newton was more of a runner, didn't throw for many yards, right? So over their careers, Matt Ryan's a better player, but people would always say Cam was elite.
Yeah.
They would say Cam's elite, but Matt Ryan is not elite from that standpoint. Mm-hmm. But I really believe Matt Ryan, he's shown me, I've said it from time, he came from Boston College. He's a good quarterback. Mm-hmm. He's a good quarterback, but I kind of feel what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
Because some of the coordinating stuff, he's had a lot of coordinators. There's been a lot of questions about the play calling.
Yeah.
But then we beat up Matt Ryan.
Right.
Oh, his coordinators are no good,
yeah.
But now we beat up. So it's really, to me, it's like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like conflicting,
I totally agree.
You know what I'm saying? On each hand, you're saying you're fighting against each other.
And you don't have 1,000 years to use these guys, right? These careers are finite lengths of time, and when they're in their prime, you better make sure you got your coaching stuff figured out and your offensive line stuff figured out and everything to go around these guys figured out, because it's a sort of a use them because one day you're going to lose them situation. Now, J.J. Green says that he thinks that Julio Jones makes the Hall of Fame before Matt Ryan does. And on that standpoint, I agree. I agree with you. Julio is more of a Hall of Famer than Ryan is. I don't think there's any debate that Julio will be a Hall of Famer. There's obviously a Hall of Fame debate centered around Matt Ryan. That makes them different. But I'll go so far as to say this and I'll let you respond. While Julio is more of a surefire Hall of Famer than Matt Ryan is, Matt Ryan's far more difficult to replace than Julio Jones is.
That franchise quarterback, I agree with you 100%.
Because look at the teams that are really terrible right now. Mm-hmm. Washington, Cincinnati, Miami. The worst teams in the NFL are all kind of wrestling to figure out who their quarterback is. When you take franchise quarterback off a team, when your guy either gets older, which I guess is happening with Andy Dalton, or whatever's happening with Josh Rosen, guys like that. When you don't have a franchise quarterback, you have a tendency to kind of flounder back to the bottom of the NFL. And that's one of the reasons why I think that Ryan ought to be more appreciated from fans than he is, because if you're a Falcons fan, I think your thought process ought to be, well, at least we're not as bad as these teams that don't have their quarterback situation figured out.
Right. So here's another comparison. I keep hearing Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer. Please, man. Please, Phillip Rivers ain't been in no AFC championship.
I totally agree.
Phillip Rivers ain't won nothing. So look where they are now in comparison to where Matt Ryan is. I'm taking Matt Ryan over their entire careers, because when you look at the things that Matt has done, in my appreciation for what he has done, the guy puts in the work.
Right.
Now in my career, man, I would have loved to have a Matt Ryan. Listen, if we would have had a Matt Ryan all those years, we had Jeff George, we had Chris Miller, we had Billy Joe Tyler, we had Bobby Abrams. You give me Matt Ryan and we had a quarterback like that who's a leader, that dirty bird little year we would have had 2 or 3 or 4 opportunities to get to the Super Bowl, just because that quarterback is tough.
Yeah.
He stays on the field, he competes, and he can make plays. So I don't have no problem with Matt Ryan.
A couple good comments on YouTube, and then I want to talk about some injuries. G Money says, good quarterbacks are hard to find. Be careful what you wish for. And I think G's right about that. I hope I pronounced this correctly. Drager on Soup says, he agrees with G Money on that. He says his offensive age is percentage of run to pass is heavy. Needs to come up with more runs to get or get an assistant that can offset the pass with some creative plays. I've always said that I would love to see Ryan in more of a hurry up, quick throw type offense, which is kind of in vogue in some place around the NFL. But in terms of the run to pass imbalance, look last week. You can make a case that Atlanta shouldn't have tried to run the ball at all last week against Carolina, because the run plays were completely ineffective. The pass plays were completely effective. So as recently as last week, Ryan sort of showed you that, listen, sometimes in this league right now, you're okay throwing the ball on every single down. Now, last week was an example where Atlanta could have thrown the ball as much as it wanted to. The run plays just weren't working.
Exactly right. So, look, now people mad at Matt because the run game ain't working.
Well, no, he's not mad at him. He's just saying that as Ryan gets older, being able to offset Ryan a little bit might be better, which and I understand where he's coming from, although.
But if you can, you can. Matt Ryan, if you want to be elite, that's one of the things I'm saying is, if you can offset the running game, that's what the great ones do now.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, they just got a running game really the last 2 years, but he's still putting up numbers. So in my thought process, Matt Ryan is the kind of quarterback, number one, again, because you got to be on the field. And Matt Ryan, when you make that kind of money and you are who you are, the former MVP, I don't care if we ain't got no running game. You got to make it happen. Tom Brady's done it. A lot of guys have done it. And as I'm seeing Matt Ryan, particularly with no offensive line in the last couple of years, no running game hardly, I think Matt Ryan's done fine. Yeah. But real quick on the Matt Ryan, Julio thing, who's going to the Hall of Fame first? As far as relevance to the Falcons team, Matt Ryan will always be number one. Why? Because the quarterback controls the ball 99.9% of the time. Now, let me just tell you also, let me drop some knowledge on y'all. You name me 5 wide receivers in the last 20 years that were the true catalyst that made a team win a Super Bowl. The Atlanta Falcons can win a Super Bowl without Julio Jones. No disrespect. No disrespect. Look, look at the great teams. T.O. ain't got no Super Bowls. Randy Moss ain't got no Super Bowls. They're on the same level with Julio Jones. So the Falcons, when you look at other teams, and Julio's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you got a better chance of winning a Super Bowl with Matt Ryan than Julio Jones, simply because receivers, you can fill that need, but you got to have the offensive line, defense, and that quarterback, and that's how you're going to win a Super Bowl.
Strong words from the former Falcon Chuck Smith. It's AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. My name is Brandon Adams. Of course, good to have Nino the Rhino, Big Chuck Smith, with us here on the show each and every week, presented by Miller Lite, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. It tastes great, and it's just 96 calories, and it's a great choice for whatever you're doing this weekend to watch some football. By the way, if you like the kind of coverage you get from the Atlanta Falcons on the AJC, you'll like it even better, more in-depth coverage when you become an AJC subscriber. As a special thank you to you, you can get this officially branded Atlanta Falcons cooler, courtesy of the AJC. You know, the AJC, proud partners of the Atlanta Falcons. And this is a special thank you when you become an AJC subscriber. You see the website on your screen, subscribe.ajc.com/FalconsNewsNow. That's subscribe.ajc.com/FalconsNewsNow. Lots of choices, whether it be 7-day home delivery, you want the e-paper to send to your device every day, a combination of the two, the e-paper plus maybe the Sunday print, which everybody loves. All those choices available, whichever option you choose. As a special thank you, the Falcons Cooler. But you got to use this website. Subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. Now, speaking of Falcons coverage in the AJC, D. Orlando Ledbetter in Flowery Branch here today, watching on Falcons practice. A couple big names not spotted during practice today. D-Led tweeting this out. No Austin Hooper, the tight end. No Devontae Freeman, the running back. I think we got that from D-Led on Twitter about that. None of that. They were not seen there at practice today, which obviously kind of confirms what we already suspected, that both Freeman and Hooper will not be playing on Sunday. And for Atlanta, concerned about how you go out and get another win with some kind of key injuries going on there.
Well, I think so. I think they showed last week they can play without him. You know, Hooper, you got Calvin Ridley, you got other guys that are feeling the need, but Brian, it's not really, to me, a big story. Freeman, when he played most of the time, was ineffective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just think the Falcons, with Hooper, you'll miss him, but they've shown that they're putting up big numbers without him.
Well, I think the point you make about Freeman to deal with here first, and this is really, to me, a condemnation of Freeman, really, in that the fact that he's injured, not able to play, and the average fan isn't more concerned about that than he is. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you're starting running back, a guy that you gave some money to a couple of years ago, if that guy's not playing in a game like this, the average fan will be like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do without Devontae Freeman? I can guarantee you right now, check our YouTube comments, check our Facebook comments. For the most part, no one's asking, oh man, how does Atlanta survive without Devontae Freeman? Now, the Hooper situation is a little bit different. We'll get to that in a moment. But in terms of the Freeman thing, like, you never want to be one of these things where if you don't come to work one day, nobody notices. That's not good for your future job security. And in the case of Devontae Freeman, that's kind of the deal of, okay, Freeman's likely out. D-Led, you see there, didn't see him at practice here today, not going to play on Sunday. The average Falcon fan won't be thinking about Freeman whatsoever. In fact, wouldn't mind seeing some of these other running backs like Hill and some of the others, Kenyon Bonner, kind of involved there. That's not a good sign for Freeman's future in a Falcons uniform, I don't believe.
Right. And let me tell you, the biggest thing that happened to Freeman, in my opinion, he got the money and got hurt and didn't play.
Yeah.
So that was like, oh, we paid him all his money. He wasn't able to perform. And some of that's not Free's fault because you got injured.
Yeah.
But as he comes back, he's not as effective. But then we always also know that the offensive line hadn't been quite there. But I think the big thing was where Falcon fans kind of forgot about him, got down on him. Free was injured. He didn't, he got that big money. Then the next year when the Falcons were struggling, he wasn't a part of any of that. So I think the Falcon fans kind of looked at it like, well, he's gone, so we still need to move forward.
Now, on the Hooper injury, I thought you said something really good about this a moment ago, that Atlanta last week actually weathered the storm of not having Hooper pretty well, all things being equal. And it was one of the things that makes Calvin Ridley's performance as impressive as it was, the fact that he goes 8 catches, 143 yards, added a touchdown in the mix there on that. The fact that that guy stepped up on a day when they were really doing everything they could to bracket Julio Jones and you didn't have Hooper to be able to throw to, the fact that Ridley stepped up as well as he did a week ago, I think that really speaks to what makes the win against Carolina last week a pretty impressive one for Atlanta overall, because we know how important of an offensive weapon that Austin Hooper has been. In fact, I think it was you saying a week ago that you're kind of curious to see who do they throw the ball to when they don't have Hooper to throw it to seemingly every single time.
Right.
So the fact that they kind of weathered the storm of not having Hooper on Sunday, not difficult to do that for a second week in a row, especially against a pretty good Tampa defense, all things being equal. But, I mean, Atlanta actually played pretty well without Hooper last week.
Man, they did really well without Hooper. Now, I mean, you don't ever want to lose one of your, key players who's developed into a Pro Bowler. Hooper's a Pro Bowler. I mean, he's one of the best tight ends in the league. And I'm watching him week in and week out, and I think you are too. But Calvin Ridley has really stepped up. I think the Sanu trade was huge. You've talked about it, I've talked about it.
That's right.
You got a second-round pick for Sanu.
Yeah.
And you got an opportunity to develop one of the young guys in Calvin Ridley. I mean, it's a win-win, but the passes that Matt Ryan was throwing, I know I'm bringing it back to Matt.
Yeah.
Those were some incredible passes. The one he threw to Ridley, it was entire across the field.
Yeah.
He was crossing, so, I mean, Ridley had an incredible game, but I love Ridley. One thing I'm excited to start seeing, if they start doing it, I want him to do it. I want to see those quick screens, those gadget plays, and
yeah.
I want to put Ridley one time in the one back power. In the gun.
Oh yeah, like the Wildcat.
Let me see Ridley in the
Wildcat. That was Sanu's old spot, and give that to Ridley now.
He's a baller.
I mean, listen, I think that Ridley's a sensational talent. I really do. I think he's your next Julio Jones when Julio moves on.
You think? Now, that's a bold. Remember you said a minute ago that was a bold statement I made.
Yeah,
that's a bold statement. Now we just talked about a first ballot Hall of Fame.
Well, I'm not saying that Ridley's going to become a Hall of Famer the way Julio is, but when Julio eventually moves on, really becomes at that point in time the number one receiver that you build the entire offense around.
You feel comfortable? He's number one.
I feel like he definitely has number one receiver in his future. I think it'd be great to see him kind of step up in more of a number two receiver role where you make the Falcons' passing offense more prolific. But I have zero doubt in my mind that Ridley's a number one receiver. Now, is he a Hall of Fame level receiver the way that Jones is? The bet is no one's going to be quite that good, right? You would always assume less than that.
Rare air. I mean, you're in
completely. But in terms of the kind of number one receiver that you could build an offense around, I'm talking about this is a guy I've been watching going back to his college days, Alabama. I see nothing from Calvin Ridley that makes me think that he couldn't be a receiver that you could build a passing offense around.
Well, I think he is. I think he's going to be a number one receiver. I just was interested in what you thought.
They're very good. Let me do a couple things over here on YouTube for a moment. View Lee says about Chuck Smith that he ought to be a Falcons coach. We said this last week. I want to make sure you're aware. Chuck says he's good. Chuck's coaching card's pretty full right now. For those of you who are not aware, Chuck does a lot of personal coaching, working with pass rushers and really anybody kind of in the front seven, defensive linemen, linebackers, everything else. Chuck's been doing big work for that for a while. And I guess, Chuck, for people like View who may be interested in your sort of coaching stuff, if they want to know more about it, how can they get in touch with you?
833-222-7225. That's 833-222-SACK. I teach the art of pass rush. I teach guys to get sacks. That's at the end of the day what I do. I start them as young as in the 6th grade, and I'll take them all the way if they want to compete all the way to the NFL. I've had guys that start in the 6th grade. So I start them in Johns Creek. A lot of services I provide, but simple. I will teach your child to smash the quarterback. You want to get your child off the bench and you want to get them playing, send them to me, and here's the mission. Here's my mission statement. We punish quarterbacks. That's the mission statement. I'll help your son smash the other team's quarterback. Simple.
I love that, man. That is well said from a guy who really does. I mean, everybody's got a passion in life, right? I got passions. Everybody's got passions. Chuck's passion is seeing quarterbacks down on the ground. He wants grass stains on those jerseys for those quarterbacks.
Question. All day, every day.
And with that in mind, before we talk a little bit more about Devontae Freeman in a moment, it's got to make you feel good to see Atlanta kind of paying off on some of that kind of stuff the last couple of weeks, right?
It really does, man. Yeah. And I like to see in the development. And, I evaluate where you are, right? When I talked about Tack, hey, he ain't rushing the passer, right? So I'm going to call a spade a spade. Yeah. And I still would like to see some development of some moves. But production speaks for itself. You can talk all you want. I can sit up here and run my mouth all I want, but it's about production. That's what it is. So you can rush the passer when you got production.
Yeah.
If you ain't getting no production, you ain't a pass rusher. So pass rush ain't about moves. It helps to have the moves, and I would like for you to use the moves. But whether you fall into one or sack one, it's about production.
That's right.
I'm really excited watching because I've said this. Get Adrian Claiborne in the game. He's our best rusher. He is. So he opened up stuff for everybody last week. But the Falcons, they're doing a great job. Alan Bailey got a sack. Tack got a sack. Just keep it going. It's huge. But the biggest key, one of the biggest keys, the secondary did better. But the biggest key for me to get sacks, you got to have an opportunity because your offense has a big lead. If you don't have a big lead in your offense in scoring points, you'll have a chance to rush the passer. And now the Falcons do the same thing this week. If the Falcons score 21, 28 points before third quarter, them guys, they'll get 5 or 6 more sacks.
AJC Falcons News now sponsored by Miller Lite. We mentioned Devontae Freeman a moment ago. I thought it was very interesting. Bill Barnwell, a writer from ESPN that I have great respect for, recently included Freeman on a list of what he calls disaster contracts for running backs around the NFL. There are guys like Todd Gurley on here and others, but Freeman's the name that Falcons fans care about. Here's what Barnwell said about the situation involving Devontae Freeman. After a lost 2018 season, he was averaging 3.5 yards per carry this season before going down because of a foot injury. He already had missed 17 games for the past 3 seasons, which you mentioned a moment ago. Barnwell goes on to say he might miss Sunday's game with the Bucs. Seems likely that he will. Finally, Bill Barnwell says the 27-year-old will almost surely be a cap casualty for the Falcons this offseason. That's Bill Barnwell for ESPN calling the Devontae Freeman contract a disaster. Now listen, it's not my deal here to necessarily beat up on Freeman because, let's face it, he's been criticized a bunch. This becomes a Thomas Dimitroff issue because, like, the one thing, almost every running back who's given a really big contract, the team that gives that contract lives to regret it. I mean, this is like as much of a hard and fast rule as you can have in the NFL. Salary cap league, where every dollar you spend is precious. Those teams that have overspent on running backs, they've all, for the most part, ended up being a disaster. Mm-hmm. If you're Thomas Dimitroff, shouldn't you have known this going into it?
Well, I think at the time he was hot. You know, he was one of theirs. All those little things you get emotional about it.
Yeah.
But the thing that was really interesting is that Freeman, was he threatening to hold out or he held out or something like that? I don't remember.
It's definitely a negotiation.
Yeah, it was a negotiation.
Yeah.
I mean, he really had no true leverage because when you look at the dynamics of running backs around the league, those guys are everywhere. You know what I mean? Guys that can run. The key is having a good offensive line.
Yeah.
You know, but I think when you look at it, no, it's just not Thomas Dimitroff. Ultimately, when people evaluate the signing of Devontae Freeman, it's going to be a lot more people involved. You got scouting, you got advanced scouting, you got pro scouts, you got college scouts. I'm not saying I'm not exactly sure how the Falcons dynamics work, but it's more than just Thomas Dimitroff. When all this comes out, they're all going to be in it together.
Yeah. Somebody on YouTube says that Freeman may have to restructure his contract to stay with the team. I'm even wondering if that option is going to be on the table for him.
That's what I was just thinking. And I hope so. To me, I would come back and go to Free and say, hey, why don't you take a little less money? Because where else is he going to go? I mean, if he goes somewhere else, he's going to get the same money. So why not stay where you're familiar, maybe have a dual role here, take another year to get better? Because if you go somewhere else, now you got to buy another house, you're changing what you're used to, and you're still going to take less money. So to me, the Falcons have leverage over Freeman when it comes to that kind of negotiation.
G-Money says the biggest thing that happened to Freeman was Shanahan. If he'd stayed with the Falcons in 2015, Freeman would have never got the extension, not the money that he got. You know, that certainly may be the case there. Also, plenty of talk about Thomas Dimitroff over in the YouTube comment section there as well. Falcon Hawks Braves fans extraordinaire says, I want to see what a rookie running back can do. I mean, that's the one thing we keep hearing continually is that some people think that Freeman's presence is actually putting a lid on the progress for some of the other guys on the roster.
You're big-time college football. You do shows.
Yeah, sure.
Every weekend I'm watching, there's some incredible college running backs.
There really are.
To me, in NFL, I'm never paying a guy that. Ever, unless he's a generational type of talent, like Saquon Barkley, as they're saying. Let's see, this is year 2. Saquon ain't quite the generational talent. So I know New Yorkers out there going to say, well, okay, year
Saquon
2. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you finish. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, last year he's a generational type talent, but when you ain't got them other pieces, you're not a generational type talent. So right now, his second year is kind of like, wah.
Right. I mean, to me, Saquon Barkley for the Giants is the exact same thing we're saying about all these big contracts for veteran running backs. Of drafting a running back that early, I don't care if he even is a good player. That's not the best use of your draft pick there early in the draft, especially when you took Barkley then and took Daniel Jones the previous year. If you maybe there are some Giants fans watching right now, or just people curious about the league, go back and look at the quarterbacks that the Giants could have drafted instead of drafting Saquon Barkley. You can get a running back in the 5th round.
Yeah, and that's something like I was talking about earlier when we were talking about Julio and who's more important and all that. Yeah. It's not as much about important. It's the fact that the quarterback handles the ball every play. A receiver is only as good as a quarterback that can throw to him. So almost like the running back, I mean, you're at the mercy of the offensive line, so you don't control all the narratives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So from a running back and a wide receiver, they don't control all the narratives.
Victor Vashawn Phillips says Brian Hill's better than Freeman anyway. Since you mentioned college football, can I say one more thing about college football here just for a second?
Come on, man.
JJ Green in our Facebook comment section brings this up. You know, at one point in time, I was all like, fall on your face for Chase, do whatever you can do to draft Chase Thomas. That opportunity may not be out there for the Falcons right now. They may not get the big pass rusher from Ohio State. That just may not go down. What about Derek Brown from Auburn? Like a defensive tackle, a guy they moved around a good bit. Y'all, he's a load. Is there a chance Atlanta could get that spot, drafted Derek Brown? Because what JJ was mentioning is, hey, imagine putting a defensive lineman, defensive tackle next to some of these guys. You may be able to build up your defensive front a little bit more. I'd love to get the pass rush from Ohio State. Derek Brown wouldn't be all that bad, though.
Man, Derek Brown will be just as good as Chase Young when it comes to what he does.
I said Thomas a moment ago. It's Chase Young.
Yeah,
right,
Chase Young. And let me tell you why. This man is massive. He
Yeah.
can get upfield, and he is powerful. But let me tell you, if the Falcons could get him, what a perfect situation. He is a shade nose guard.
Yeah.
He is a true nose guard that can play a three technique. He can play a 5 technique. But put him on the nose, and Grady always plays as a 3, and you won't have to worry about the inside. He stops. Now that, to me, that's a dream. Because Derek Brown is going in the first 3 picks.
Right.
I mean, he's going.
You think he's drafted that high?
Oh, no question.
Okay.
No question about that.
By the way, one more thing on Freeman before we move on. DeJuan Hayes says getting rid of Freeman without something great in return is a big mistake. And that obviously goes back to the Ian Rappaport report from the trade deadline that Atlanta talked about trading Freeman to Detroit. I just don't know that I believe that from Rappaport. I'm not saying that Rappaport's intentionally lying. I'm saying that maybe his source on this exaggerated the nature of those conversations, because given the fact that I think it's fairly obvious that Freeman's going to end up being a cap casualty for Atlanta, the idea they could have traded him for something and didn't get something in return for it, I just have a hard time seeing the Falcons doing that. It would have been a gigantic mistake if Atlanta could have traded Freeman and didn't. So the idea that you're going to let Freeman go without getting anything for him, I just wonder if a team was really willing to make that trade. Detroit was the rumored team, according to Rappaport from the NFL Network. I've just never quite believed that was really out there and available for the Falcons.
I don't know about that. My network is not as strong as Rappaport's, but I don't know. That's one of those things that anybody can say that literally you can.
Right.
I could have tweeted that out and people would be like, "Oh, is that true?"
Yeah.
You could have did the same thing and it would have
Right.
took off like wildfire.
Right.
But who's to say, man? Who's to say it's over with? Again, I think the one thing I'll say about Free, no matter if you think he has value, if his value is worth how much he's getting paid, you understand his value on the field is worth what he's getting paid.
Yep.
It's not over yet, though.
Right.
I mean, I've seen players come back and get healthier. Remember, he's coming off of injuries. He's just coming back. We've been saying, here's the other thing, too, and I'm bouncing a little bit. This is about Freeman. All right, the offensive line, half the people in the beginning of the season, there's not one person that I will say before that season in my network that I'm dealing with when in the media will say, man, that offensive line is incredible.
That's a good point.
What an offensive line. But then we beat up Free because he can't run behind an incredible line. So there are some other, we talked about the intangibles that affect the running back in the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
You can't do it as a receiver without a quarterback or no line.
Yeah.
Or you can't do it without a running back. So to me, again, here we go, basically debating against our same argument.
No, I think that's fair. By the way, we've had some discussions about Falcons playoff odds. What's the chances Atlanta wins the division? D. Orlando Ledbetter from the AJC did some good work on that this week at AJC.com. Let me show you this from D-Led for a second. Now, this is not great. He says, if the Falcons run the table and get to 9-7, can they make the playoffs? Their chance of making the playoffs are less than 1%, according to the New York Times Playoff Simulator. There are too many teams with at least 8 wins, D-Led writes. San Francisco's at 9, New Orleans at 8, Green Bay's at 8, Minnesota's at 8, Seattle's at 8. If we assume here for a second that Minnesota and Seattle are the 2 wildcard teams, but this is me talking, this is not D-Led. If we give the division to Green Bay, give the division to San Francisco, we'd assume that Minnesota and Seattle are the 2 wild cards. The pain of that is that both those teams have head-to-head wins over Atlanta right now, which is just bad luck. It's also bad luck that that Atlanta got off to as bad a start as it did. But this year the NFC is just really, really deep. If Atlanta's 5-5, it's a totally different discussion right now. If Atlanta's in the AFC, it's a totally different discussion right now. But if you want to just keep this really, really simple and succinct, to me, I don't think you worry about Minnesota. I don't think you worry about Seattle. I don't think you worry about any of those teams. I think you keep your eye on 2 things. First of all, Atlanta's got to keep winning its games, and frankly, Tampa on Sunday's no pushover. But Atlanta's got to keep winning its games, and you just need New Orleans to lose the rest of them. Just lose them all. You need the bottom to fall out in New Orleans. They still play San Francisco. They still play Carolina twice. You need to win all of yours. So to me, it's that simple. You just got to win them all. You need New Orleans to just have the absolute basement fall out from underneath them.
We got 3 wins right now. I mean,
yeah.
I totally understand what D. Orlando, what he's saying, because that will be historical if they pulled it off.
Yeah, less than 1% chance.
That will absolutely be historical.
Less than 1%
if
chance.
They pull it off. But the interesting part is, Falcon fans are excited about the possibility. Until the Falcons lose, that conversation is going to continue to keep being talked about.
That's exactly right. So, by the way, speaking of New Orleans and everything else for Week 12 around the National Football League, let's do a quick preview of that right now on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Buffalo hosting Denver. Chicago Giants, bad game on both sides. Quarterback situation going to be in the spotlight for the Bears there. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, not a great game at this point.
Terrible.
Yeah, Cincinnati's terrible. Miami at Cleveland. Boy, kind of a rough stretch here in the early going here. So there's one to watch for. Carolina at New Orleans. Any chance Carolina pulls the upset in the Superdome?
Nope. Not Carolina. When I watched Carolina against the Falcons, the offensive line was terrible.
Yeah.
They were limited at wide receiver.
Yeah.
McCaffrey's good. Defense is solid. D-line, secondary bad. I'm down on Carolina right now.
What do you think about Oakland going across country to take on the Jets? We've said before, Oakland's one of our real surprise teams. Jets at times have shown some signs of life, although admittedly not a great team. It's tough sometimes the travel. You trust Oakland going 3,000 miles to the Meadowlands on Sunday?
I do, but the Jets play really hard at home. But I think this Oakland team has something, man. They're young, they're aggressive, and they're playing well right now.
Boy, this is a horrible slate of games. Detroit at Washington is terrible. I have no idea about Matthew Stafford's status for that game. Seattle at Philadelphia. Philadelphia lost last week. At this point in time, they've got little to play for. Jacksonville at Tennessee. That's an awful game.
Whatever.
Dallas at New England. That's a pretty fun game. That's a fun game, especially for a Dallas team who's, I don't know, trying to figure some things out right now. Boy, Dak Prescott played great this past Sunday. That's a pretty fun game. Green Bay, San Francisco is a pretty fun game there as well.
That's a great game.
And then obviously Baltimore, looking ahead to Monday, as entertaining a team to watch in football right now because of the things that Lamar Jackson's doing at the moment.
Question.
So, interesting Week 12 slate. Here's part of AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. And at this point in time in the show, we have come to my favorite part. There's nothing I love more than a walk through the history of the Atlanta Falcons organization from a guy who was really a part of a lot of those significant moments. And today we've got another game ball, and this one is quite appropriate. Chuck, would you mind telling us what you brought in?
Yeah, it's a game ball from Tampa Bay. We won 35-7.
So who puts the art on this? Help me understand that. Who paints that?
I think it's the equipment guys. I'm not sure. I'm really not.
Because this is a very cool. I knew game balls were a thing, but I didn't know you got like the paint or like the decal on there.
Yeah,
I didn't know you got that.
And this is 1992.
Yeah.
How many years was that ago? What?
Long time ago. Yeah.
Some 30 years.
Don't make me do math out loud right now.
Me neither, but 92, right?
Yeah.
And I'm 49 now, and back then I was 23 or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is from Tampa. I got the game ball. This is my first game ball I ever got. So I had the chance to go against a legend in Tampa. His name was Anthony Munoz.
Really?
He was in double-digit years. He was old.
Yeah.
I was young and very aggressive.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a good day for a legend.
Right.
I took pride in absolutely annihilating
no doubt.
him that day.
Munoz, arguably one of the great offensive tackles of all time.
He was old, though. It wasn't like I beat up the real Anthony Munoz.
Sure.
But
listen, you tell your kid.
But he got mad because I said some things to him that most young guys wouldn't.
Really?
Yep. We didn't get fined for curse words back in the day. They get fined now. We used to. But the guy was great. I had like 2 sacks, game-winning sacks, and just an honor to play against Anthony Munoz and got my first game ball against Tampa.
Man, I just love when you bring this kind of stuff in. I think it's just really, really cool and a great way to sort of celebrate Falcons history. And the fact that it happened against Tampa. Now, this was a creamsicle Tampa too, right?
Yeah, it was, exactly.
The orange uniforms, yeah. Honestly, I kind of like those old Bucs uniforms.
I think it was Vinny Testaverde who was the quarterback.
Yeah, and Testaverde, he
was
played
a
1,000 years.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, 1,000 years.
Back in the day, I had my nice little hair pushed back like Dion.
There you go.
Push waves. Had a mink coat back in them days.
Listen, I love to hear
Too legit to quit.
I'd love to hear that. That is good stuff. Hey, thanks for being with us here on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Don't forget to go to subscribe.ajc.com. Become an AJC subscriber. Get the best Falcons coverage there is. Get this Falcons branded cooler as a special thank you for that. Of course, the AJC. Proud partners of the Atlanta Falcons. Y'all enjoy the game against the Bucs. If Atlanta wins this one, and if New Orleans loses to Carolina,
watch out.
Thanksgiving night could at least be pretty fun. But we got a lot of stuff to do before we get there. So y'all enjoy the game. We'll see how it goes. We'll talk to you back here again Monday at 1 p.m. for AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Have a great weekend, everybody.